It's good to be here with my friend Kevin Noertker, the founder and CEO of Ampaire, which is, as some or many of you know, is a very innovative company that's now based in Long Beach that is in the sustainable aviation space. You do hybrid electric powertrains. You're a leader in the space. I think you was it 2 years ago you had the world's first ever flight for electric hybrid. Is that correct?
Yeah, first flight was 2019, believe it or not.
God.
And
Okay,
2 years ago, though,
yeah.
was resetting the record for the largest hybrid electric aircraft to fly.
Right. Yeah. So it's a space that I'm absolutely fascinated by because it's, I like what's new and what's sort of coming down the pike, and this really is coming down the pike, sustainable aviation. When we started CoMotion in 2017, we were in some ways kind of pioneers in talking about what was called urban air mobility at the time, but it was still very conceptual and very much in the future, and nobody really believed in it at all. But since then, there's been an absolute explosion in this space. Partially, it's an imperative of reducing the carbon emissions of flight, but it's also new technologies that are coming into play. And I think what's also so interesting and gratifying for us at CoMotion LA, because we're based in LA, is that this area, this region, is really the epicenter of so much that is happening in the space. So Kevin, just talk a little bit about your story. And you're a local boy, Caltech, local boy made good.
Yeah, all those bad guys over in Pasadena. Nerds, all of us. Yeah, I mean, look, I remember that 2017 CoMotion LA, right there in the heart of the Arts District, right? This, in my background, Caltech mechanical engineering, robotics research at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, picked up a job, worked at Northrop Grumman in stealth technology research and development, and then satellite Earth observing technologies there. Deep technical aerospace background here in the city, and it's been wonderful to watch this ecosystem evolve over the last about 8.5 years since kicking off Ampaire. The reality is that in order to do these really hard things, sustainable aviation, electric mobility, you need first and foremost you need the people. There's a workforce challenge that holds back progress in a lot of places in the world, and when you look at the workforce that's available for some of these, like aviation plus electric vehicles, there really aren't all that many places in the world that are renowned for both. And this is, we founded the company in Temecula, actually, is where we began, so about halfway between LA and San Diego, and we were there because that's where we could get free rent and a free garage to build our first prototypes in, literally a garage shop there. But then when we did the trade on where are we going to build the company, looking at everything east to west coast and all of the epicenters of automotive or aviation, right. LA is really the one that balances between the two and has been a great place to be growing Ampaire. We were based in the Arts District of downtown LA at the Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator.
At Lacey, yeah. We would run into each other.
Exactly,
That was our first time.
And which was a phenomenal resource for us. We needed the space, we needed the mentorship. Ultimately outgrew that space and moved over to the Hawthorne Airport, right in the shadow of SpaceX and Tesla. Right. Spent 5 years there at the literal intersection of aviation and electric vehicle innovation, building our electrified aviation company. And then outgrew that space earlier this year and then moved down to Long Beach. And that was also a really interesting journey. Yes, Long Beach. And I just got appointed as a commissioner on the Economic Development Commission. So now my job is to help bring additional people down to the city. But like whether it's Long Beach, which is building out Space Beach, and all of these innovative companies come into that area, or you go deep into the heart of El Segundo, or even up in Santa Monica, this entire corridor of Los Angeles is just teeming with people, talent, people who dream big dreams and actually have the capacity to do it. And now you're starting to see the ecosystem of funders and other partners come in to support the growth.
And as you say, I mean, talent really is key because it's Where else, sort of globally, would you? Because Europe, I mean, you have, Zero Avia, for example, which is a big player in hydrogen aviation, is now essentially a British company. Airbus in France is very active. You have Fokker in the, Meet the Fokkers up in Netherlands.
Yeah, it's certainly global. I mean, I was listening to some folks talk about this just last night, the global supply chain for aircraft, and even if you wanted to bring the whole thing domestic, you couldn't. Like a 737 is built around the world, and there's simply, and same with Airbus aircraft, it's not a single location. So very global industry, and you're seeing these trends emerge over that global ecosystem as well. So, for example, Europe, very forward-thinking in a lot of the sustainability initiatives. You've got France, and specifically Airbus is pretty bullish on some of the hydrogen objectives and doing the new aircraft type designs. But you also see a good trade of innovation and talent. So, for example, two of my peer companies, one from Toulouse, the other which was in Sweden, both of them relocated to LA just this past year in order to probably for their one for propulsion, the other for business development and capital raising. But you see in this global ecosystem, even then, there's a strong bridge back here to Southern California.
Yeah. Maybe just a minute or two on hydrogen. Now, you're not in hydrogen, you're in hybrid electric and a leader in that. And I've noticed that people who are very much in electric tend not to like hydrogen and vice versa, but anyway. Yeah. But there seems to be a whole explosion of activity around hydrogen and aviation. Joe Ben Beavert, the founder and CEO of Joby, which is probably the leading electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft company, is a complete hydrogen convert. They flew a test flight about 3 months ago that was over 500 miles for one of their eVTOLs that could normally only go maybe 100 miles maximum. That opens up a whole new possibilities for this. What are your thoughts on that? Did you ever think, gee, I should have gone into hydrogen?
Yeah, certainly always consider what the alternatives are. I think hydrogen's very exciting because from a gravimetric energy density, it can carry much more energy than lithium-ion batteries can today. Yeah. Significantly more. In fact, it's comparable in many ways to the energy density of jet fuel. And when you're looking for, in aviation, something that's lightweight and carries a lot of energy, hydrogen has a lot of great properties that align with those desires. From a technology standpoint, it's been pretty interesting over the last few years seeing the fuel cell technologies become more efficient and at the scale that can actually power certain types of aircraft. So demonstrations from good folks at Zero Avia, Universal Hydrogen had some good demonstrations as well.
Until they went bankrupt.
Until they went bankrupt. But the issue that hydrogen runs into is that even though it compares very well in theory, because of the energy density, there are a lot of other challenges that make it difficult to bring to market. So first and foremost on the sourcing of hydrogen. And I think these are ideas that I would encourage folks in the audience to look at. How do we invest in these areas? How do we mature these risks and burn them down so that we can actually find the opportunity for something like hydrogen in transportation down the road at scale? Hydrogen production, that's actually green hydrogen. I think it's 0.1% of hydrogen today is green. And at that, it's very expensive. So let's get production up. Let's get the cost way down. Once we solve that, let's deploy it into all these industrial needs that hydrogen has to be used for, is already used for. And then once we have the economics that make sense, over that, in parallel with that, I think we're going to get the regulatory standpoints and all these other factors, which are also important in aviation, that it'll start to make sense commercially. And I think that that's one of the things that has held back some of the fully electric or some of the hydrogen approaches in our industry is just all of the factors that go into truly commercializing a technology. And if you don't have an answer, a good checkbox on every single one of those, that's not just theory, but actually deployed reality, you won't make it to market.
But those same arguments could be made for sustainable aviation fuel, for SAF, which is, in theory, just absolutely wonderful. I mean, this idea that you don't have to retrofit planes. You can just pump in the SAF fuel, except the damn thing is too expensive. It's twice as expensive as
at best.
at best.
Right?
Yeah.
If you're using like a HEFA type approach, then you can get maybe twice as expensive, but you can't get the feedstock to get to scale.
So there's no airline that's going to switch to SAF.
Not fully. And I mean, if you look at the SAF production today and the different channels by which you could get SAF, even looking power to liquid and some of these other methods, I mean, you're looking at a sometimes 10 times factor increase in the cost. Yeah. Now that should come down over time, but if you're just looking first principles physics, it's probably until we have like free energy from nuclear
Explain
reactors.
a little power to liquid, because that's something that really is very, very new.
It's quite interesting.
I think certainly the Gulf countries are going to make a big play in that space.
Yeah, because
they have a lot of cheap electricity.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get very low cost electricity and you're able to pull carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and repurpose it into your hydrocarbon chains, basically building the chemistry building blocks that build everything else, there's a whole lot of exciting things you can do that are carbon neutral or negative because you've sourced that carbon from atmospheric carbon. And this is the idea on power to liquid sustainable aviation fuels. The challenge there is, of course, I mean, your chemistry is sometimes expensive from a energy standpoint. And if your full cycle opportunity uses more energy than it kind of brings, it ends up costing a lot more. And I think that's the challenge for most of the world is the cost of electricity is too high to make economic sense on a lot of the power to liquid currently. Right. But there are obviously a lot of really smart people working on bringing that to better scale. And yet even then, even the enthusiasts project that you might have a double the cost of jet fuel at best. And so that's where we see equipment solutions being so important. Right. Hybrid electric, our systems burn half as much fuel, so it's twice as good. And that's good from a carbon emission standpoint. It's also good from the economic standpoint. This is the allure of electric as well, is that you don't have to have that carbon in the fuel.
Right. And then, I mean, you work on propulsion systems and you work with existing form factors of planes. But one of the exciting new areas is new kinds of form factors, blended wing. We see Jet Zero. We were just chatting, another company in Long Beach, or near Long Beach, I guess. In Long Beach, which has raised quite a lot of money. Explain for the audience what blended wing is.
So zooming out, in addition to sustainable aviation fuels and propulsion systems that burn less fuel, you can actually approach the sustainable aviation challenge through new airplane designs. Right. So think like most airplanes that you'd ever get into are called like tube and wing, where you, as it sounds, you've got your main tube and then you got wings popping out from it. But what if you blended, instead of having a tube, you actually blended it out so you had almost like a room rather than just an alley inside of that fuselage? Right. That is what a blended wing body looks like. It's almost, if you could imagine, kind of like the B-2 bomber is a flying wing. It's approximating that. Now, there are a few really innovative companies working on that, and if they get it right, the analysis shows that they're going to be saving up to 50% fuel just because of the new airframe design. And that's transformative, and you can carry hundreds of people in those types of planes. Yeah. It's also very challenging to build the next Boeing and literally take on Airbus and Boeing, which is what companies like Jet Zero at the Long Beach airport are doing. Plug for Jet Zero, when they moved to their new facility, they vacated the one that I picked up. So
there you go. Okay.
So there's a small ecosystem there of folks, and we know their team real well. So so it's quite interesting from the airframe design for blended wing bodies and others. This ties in with the propulsion as well, because we were talking about Joby earlier. There's a new type of design thinking that can happen around creating an airplane where you're uniquely integrating electrified propulsion in a way that was never possible before.
Explain.
So think about like a helicopter. A helicopter only really could have one engine or maybe two engines, but single gearbox up to a big spinning propeller at the top. But Joby has 6. Right? How do you have 6? Well, you can't have 6 small engines, because the smaller a combustion engine is, the less efficient it is. And so it just doesn't work from an engineering standpoint. But as soon as you have electric motors that can turn those propellers, now you can place them almost anywhere. And that means that you can put them in places that are really aerodynamically efficient, that give you better better cruise performance and energy efficiencies there. You can also place them in places where you can get your vertical lift and all these transition dynamics for helicopter-like functionality out of a plane that looks something out of the Jetsons, which is a pretty exciting future that folks are working on.
Let's just talk for a second about the future, and we're 2024. Let's say we zoom out to 2030, so 6 years from now. Where are we? Will I be getting on an Ampaire hybrid electric to go down to San Diego or up to San Francisco or to New York? What does it look like then?
Yeah, in 2030 is you absolutely will find aircraft of many types and many aircraft manufacturers using our hybrid electric systems. Generally, these flights are going to be between 50 and 500 miles, so
right.
you named a few that would make a lot of sense. Imagine hopping up to Santa Barbara, or imagine connecting communities into the major hubs. So, it's if you're in Bakersfield, where do you fly from commercially? Think about internationally the impact, and this is about social impact, not just environmental impact, of enabling access to the global economy. So by 2030, when all these planes are out there burning half as much fuel, it also is costing a lot less to fly them. And this means same day or next day delivery from more places.
Right.
It means the mom and pop shops in an area which would only be able to justify delivering locally now all of a sudden can hit the global stage. And that could be transformative for economies around the world. So we think that within this decade, you're going to get not only that in the small planes, but you're also going to get up into the, call it 50-seater type, like 30, 50-seater planes. Still relatively small towards in the big scheme of things. Those same technologies, though, will already have been deployed, at least in demonstration projects, as like the third engine in a 737 is called an auxiliary power unit. Mm-hmm. So APUs, we could make those more efficient. We could bring a lot of this technology to bear in the big planes, too.
And then you have entirely new classes of aircraft like electric sea gliders. Mm-hmm.
That's right.
And our friends from Regent
totally.
Here, so surely we're going to see those flying along our coasts.
Yeah, and I mean, there's all this again. These vehicles that never really worked quite well before the new technology came now are viable. And the idea that you can have a sea glider and think of this as like a plane that's actually a boat and then glides above the water, like 30 feet above the water. It's these very intriguing and inspiring visions for where we might go with regional mobility.
What are your thoughts? And I hate to kind of end this on a down note, but the kind of implosion of Boeing. At the same time, all of this innovation is happening. It's not really happening in Seattle, but it's happening. Ampaire, Long Beach, Jet Zero, Regent, etc. What's the impact of that? I mean, it's such a big player, Boeing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame because Boeing is like one of the gems of America, right? It's so it's sad to see, and as an industry, it's disappointing. I think that Boeing spent decades getting into the mess, and I think it'll take them decades to get out of it. It's not a simple solve. It's and I think that they're going to have to dig pretty deep culturally in order to fix it. At least from the folks who I know have worked at Boeing, I have not personally. But what I see is alongside that, and the risks being the FAA, which is the regulatory body that governs the safety of aviation, they are somewhat distracted in dealing with all of the fallout from Boeing, and there are all these questions around aviation safety, even though it is, I think, still the absolute safest mode of travel relative to all the other ones. But what you're seeing is all this innovation, and people who might have otherwise said, maybe I'll go pick up a good job at Boeing, now have this expanding opportunity set, turning it positive here, expanding opportunity set of all of these innovative companies, whether they're the small ones like Ampaire or Jet Zero, or you're looking at some of the mid-size ones that are doing very innovative work, not just defense work, but also in the commercial space, also having a positive impact on the world. There's never been a time in history where there's more innovation going on in aviation than right now. And so for an industry, I think there's a lot of hope that we can get through the Boeing thing, whatever happens to Boeing at the end of the day, who knows? But that as an innovative culture domestically and internationally, the industry looks to be a really good place.
Well, on that note, Kevin, thank you for your time. Keep up the good work. Look
Thanks.
forward to visiting you down in Long Beach. And we have Mayor Rex Richardson coming here this evening.
All right.
So great.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So